We will go back to the House once we have that vote on the censure motion. It will pass because Labor has a majority. We'll see perhaps if there is an actual vote and if coalition members put their name to either side. Joining me now is Assistant Foreign Affairs Minister Tim Watts. Thanks for your time. Unprecedented is the right word for what Scott Morrison was dealing with here. No rule book. Do you have any consideration for someone just sort of trying to figure out what to do as COVID hit?
Well, I mean, listening to Scott Morrison in the chamber, I felt that familiar sense of rising bile in my gut with the mendacious dissembling and obfuscation. Nothing that Scott Morrison said to the parliament today in any way justified his actions. Just give you one example. He took the Home Affairs portfolio in May of 2021. What could that have possibly had to do with the pandemic? This was about a megalomaniacal power grab from the former Prime Minister. Now, this censure motion
What about borders on Home Affairs and decisions on borders?
There was a minister charged with executing that responsibility. The Bell inquiry, the Bell report from an august former High Court judge made it very clear that the principles of responsible government were fundamentally undermined. Now, responsible government, that's not just about accountability to the Parliament, that's about knowing who's in charge. As Claire O'Neill, the Home Affairs Minister, said in the Parliament today, having two people concurrently in charge of national security functions, that's dangerous. If you have two different ministers giving countermanding orders in a national security issue, there is serious prospect for harm for our national security. That's not me saying that. That's Virginia Bell saying that in her report. This was a fundamental trashing of the way that responsible government is supposed to work, and it is appropriate that the Parliament expresses that.
The other unprecedented thing is censuring this particular type of motion, a former Prime Minister. Does it open up a precedent? Because there's usually something the opposition finds egregious about the other side's Prime Minister and what they do. Is this going to become de rigueur now, a censure motion when the new government comes into town on something the former PM's done?
A censure motion is a very serious step. It should be extremely rare. It is the Parliament saying this conduct was not acceptable. Now, what I'd say to you, Tom, is that I would expect that it would be extremely rare to have not just the current Prime Minister, but every preceding Liberal Party Prime Minister saying that the conduct of Scott Morrison as Prime Minister in this area was wrong. Tony Abbott said it was wrong. Malcolm Turnbull said it was wrong. John Howard said it was wrong.
But
that is unprecedented.
Necessarily said a censure motion is the right thing to do in response.
Well, a censure motion is about the Parliament joining with those voices and saying this is wrong. The thing that's really disturbed me listening to the debate today is you have a procession of Liberal Party MPs who are willing to say on background that Scott Morrison's actions were wrong and undermined responsible government, willing to say it to journalists, willing to say it to people writing books, some of them willing to say it on record outside the Parliament, but they weren't willing to stand up as parliamentarians and add their voice and say, this Parliament says this is wrong. Bridget Archer, an extraordinary speech, a really brave speech. She got it right when she said, some things are about more than day-to-day politics. Now, if it was more than day-to-day politics, they would vote according to what they knew was right. They know Scott Morrison was wrong. They've said it outside the chamber. They said it on background. They should have said it in the Parliament today.
To be fair, there's a lot of things that MPs from both sides say on background and don't say publicly. But look, it does seem there's a fair bit of opinion that this wasn't the right thing to do. I want to ask briefly, within your portfolio, the Australia-China thaw that might be on, reports today that the government might consider limiting Chinese investment in critical minerals. Could that send us back to a deep freeze?
Well, Tom, since the election, we've been very clear and consistent in the way that we've been addressing our relationship with China. There's no doubt that it's been through a challenging period, but we've made the point that it's in the interests of both sides of this relationship to stabilise the relationship. Now, that doesn't mean a reset. What that means is that in some areas, we're going to continue to disagree. We've said that...
And this one of them?
Well, we've said that we're not going to resolve from national interest or national security steps taken by the government. We've said that while the government has changed, our national interest hasn't changed. So we'll continue to disagree on issues like consular issues, some human rights issues, those trade blockages that are completely unjustified, and we won't resolve from that.
We're a bit short on time today. Events have occurred, so we'll talk longer next time. Tim Watts, thanks for your time.
Pleasure, Tom.